Hello and welcome back to Ghosts of the Webway, and today we are looking at the second part of our series, The Cast in Order of Appearance, where I go through each of the units in the Harlequins Codex in a bit of detail. So the first part we do is going through the lore, then we go into a few of the rules, and then last but not least we look at some of the more competitive builds that you could use when thinking about each unit. So today we're looking at the Shadowseer, and we'll start with the lore. Let's begin. So Shadowseers play the role of fate within the Harlequins troop, or the mask, meaning that they're also the narrators of the storyline, essentially, in that respect. They're also the most psychically adept members of the troop, meaning that they use psychic powers. But unlike, let's say, a Farseer or other Eldar Psykers, they use a lot of kind of psychological warfare. They use lots of hallucinations and create all sorts of weird imagery for their enemy and basically make them pretty, terrified, essentially. That's the plan, is just make them absolutely terrified and shit their pants. So that is the idea behind the Shadowseer. They use all of these abilities to use the fears of their enemies against them, which is a really nice little niche for them within the Harlequin mask. So we can use them as HQs as well. They can be the leaders of the mask, and they're also the diplomats. They tend to go to the other Eldari factions and try and warn them about coming disasters or about how to work together, that sort of thing. And that's it. That's the Shadowseer. Let's look at their rules. So, a Shadowseer and his or her profile. They have a movement of 8 inches, weapon skill 2+, ballistic skill 2+, strength 3, toughness 3, 5 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 9, and a 7+ save. So kind of similar to the Troop Master in that respect. 2 less attacks, saves a little bit worse, but pretty much what we might expect from a Harlequins or Eldari character. A Shadowseer is a single model armed with a shuriken pistol, hallucinogen grenade launcher, and a mist stave. So let's have a look at those. First, we have the hallucinogen grenade launcher. This is an 18-inch range, assault 1 weapon with no strength, no AP, and no damage. Why is this? Well, because of the ability. If a unit is hit by this weapon, roll 2d6. If the roll is equal to or greater than the target unit's leadership, it suffers d3 mortal wounds. Very nice. So you have to beat their leadership, and then you essentially get a smite, which is pretty good. Then we have the shuriken pistol. We looked at that one last time, but it's a 12-inch pistol 1, strength 4, damage 1, no AP weapon, but on a wound roll of a 6+, it has an AP of -3. But it's free, so why not? And then we have the mist stave. So this is the melee weapon, so this weird little skull thing here. And it's a melee weapon with strength +2, putting him at strength 5, -1 AP, and d3 damage, which is not bad. Shadowseer can beat some stuff up in combat. So smack someone on the head with a stick, and maybe they'll be dead. Now, the model can replace its shuriken pistol with a neuro disruptor, but as we discussed in the last video, they're not necessarily the best weapon at the moment. Let's see what Chapter Approved brings. Maybe the neuro disruptor is going to be the new hotness, particularly against Marines. That would be nice. Abilities, so it has Rising Crescendo and Flip Belt, which we did discuss last time. Has a Hollow Suit with a 4+ invulnerable save, which is why the 7+ save doesn't really matter. And then it has the ability, the Shield from Harm. And this is the Shadowseer specific ability. Your opponent must subtract 1 from wound rolls for any attacks made against friendly masked infantry units that are within 6 inches of any models with this ability. Very, very good. Really good. So remember, with the Troop Master, they're improving the attacks. They're making you re-roll your wounds. With the Shadowseer, it's the other way. They're there to protect the units, to make sure that they are less likely to die, which for an army as fragile as Harlequins can be really useful. You think of all that bolter fire that usually would be wounding all of your Harlequins troops on 3s, well, now they're wounding you on 4s, which is a big difference. Last but not least, the Shadowseer is a Psyker, and this model can attempt to manifest 2 psychic powers in each friendly psychic phase, and attempt to deny 1 psychic power in each enemy psychic phase. It knows the Smite power and 2 psychic powers from the Phantasmancy discipline. So let's have a look at those spells. That's up next. So, the Phantasmancy discipline. The first one that we have access to is Twilight Pathways. So let's have a look at that. Twilight Pathways has a warp charge value of 6. If manifested, select a friendly Harlequins unit within 3 inches of the Psyker and visible to it. That unit can immediately move as if it were its movement phase. You cannot use Twilight Pathways on a unit more than once in each psychic phase. That's it. Move twice, which is really good, not to be underestimated, particularly for an army like the Harlequins that have a lot of speed. So this makes them even faster. You can move again. Imagine, some of those units that move very quickly. We'll be looking at the bikes in more detail, the Skyweavers, but they move 16 inches. So 16, and then 16 inches on top. So you've got a 32-inch movement. Pretty good. And that's without advancing. So very nice power to have. Almost an auto-include in most types of army. In most lists for the Harlequins, you want to have this power. Number 2 is Fog of Dreams. So Fog of Dreams has a warp charge value of 6. If manifested, select an enemy unit within 18 inches of the Psyker and visible to it. Until the start of your next psychic phase, your opponent must subtract 1 from hit rolls for that unit that target Harlequins infantry units. -1 to hit against all infantry units. It's pretty powerful. I mean, if you have big units of troops, or your other characters as well, they're all infantry. So putting those at -1 to hit can be a really useful trick. And you could do that on anything. Put it on a repulsor, or put it on a knight. All of those weapons are now hitting -1 at all infantry. It's a very, very nasty little spell, and quite useful. Number 3, the Mirror of Minds. So, the Mirror of Minds has a warp charge value of 7. If manifested, select an enemy unit within 24 inches of the Psyker. Then both players roll a d6. If the Harlequins player's roll is equal to or higher than their opponent's, then the target unit suffers 1 mortal wound. Repeat this process until the target is destroyed, or the enemy player rolls a result that is higher than the Harlequin player's roll. This is kind of the, you feeling lucky punk kind of power. If you've got a decent dice roll on this, if you can roll hot, then this is amazing. This is an incredible power. It's so funny just to watch the frustration on someone's face as you just keep rolling higher and higher and higher. It doesn't always work. Obviously, it could be the very first roll, you roll a 1, your opponent rolls anything better than a 1, and that's it. In which case it does nothing. But if you have a little bit of a success rate, or you're feeling pretty lucky, then this is a really fun one, but it can also be a really deadly spell. I found on average I do about 2 mortal wounds, which is, I think it's a pretty good rate. And so far, that's as far as it's gone for me as well. I haven't auto-killed a knight or anything crazy, but I've done a few points of damage on them all, and it is useful. Number 4, Veil of Tears. Veil of Tears has a warp charge value of 7. If manifested, select a friendly Harlequins infantry unit within 18 inches of the Psyker. Until the start of your next psychic phase, subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made against that unit. So similar to the Fog of Dreams, in that you can do a -1 to hit, but this time, instead of targeting the enemy unit, you target your own unit and make that -1. and this can stack. So if you've got that big blob of infantry, and you pick, let's say, a knight, and say you're at -1 to hit infantry, and then you pick the blob of infantry and say that's also at -1, so you're now at -2, that makes them very unappealing, particularly with the stratagem lightning fast reflexes. Then you can go up to -3 to hit. We'll look at a few ideas for that one later, but it's a really nasty little combo. Number 5, Shards of Light. Shards of Light has a warp charge value of 7. If manifested, select an enemy unit within 18 inches of the Psyker and visible to it. That unit suffers D3 mortal wounds and must subtract 1 from its leadership characteristic until the end of your next phase. Nice, so it's Smite plus -1 leadership. Can be pretty useful, particularly in combination with a couple of the other things that you could use. For example, the little grenade launcher that we have here. So remember, you need to beat the leadership, and this is one way in which you can make that much easier. And number 6, Webway Dance. Webway Dance has a warp charge value of 7. If manifested, then until the start of your next psychic phase, roll a d6 whenever a friendly Harlequins unit within 6 inches of the Psyker loses a wound. On a 6, that wound is not lost. So it gives anything around the Psyker a feels no pain 6+. Now this can be really useful. You've got a 1 in 6 chance of avoiding wounds, and this is for everything, not just for the infantry. So with your 3 wound bikes, being able to ignore all of those wounds can be quite devastating. Anyone who plays like Cabal of the Black Hearts Drukhari will know how effective this can be at actually limiting damage. It's a nice little spell. And that's it. Those are the spells. So I don't think personally there's a bad one in there. So what you want to take is pretty much up to you, what you would want to do with it. But let's look at a few different combos that I would recommend. So let's think of the different things that you could do with your Shadowseer. So the first thing that you could do is to make him a Silent Shroud character. And then he's got the -1 leadership bubble. And then you give him the trait as well. So then you've got the +3 inches, again, like we did with the Troop Master, where you've got -1 leadership, but then also -1 to wound within 9 inches. Then you take Shards of Light, and Shards of Light will do those D3 mortal wounds, and then also give -1 to the leadership. And then it doesn't really matter what you do with the other spell, but essentially you've got -2 leadership, meaning that your grenade launcher is going to be good. You've got Smite and you've got Shards of Light. So that's D3 mortal wounds, followed by D3 mortal wounds, followed by D3 mortal wounds. So he can have quite a nice little damage output, and that can be quite a powerful way of running him. Then the other thing that you could do is another Soaring Spite combo, where you use the Twilight Pathways spell, and whatever else you give him, again, it doesn't really matter too much, but then you give him the ability to disembark after a transport has moved, similar to the Troop Master. But what you can do with that is then you line everything up a little bit, and then you cast Twilight Pathways, so he gets out and then moves something even further up the board. So you can really, really push that movement up, which is also quite a nice little combo. My favourite one, however, is to give him the relic, the Suit of Hidden Knives. Now, the Suit of Hidden Knives means that when enemies attack him on a hit roll of a 1, you roll a dice, and on a 2+, then it bounces back as a mortal wound. Now, for this, you should probably give him both the Fog of Dreams and the Veil of Tears, which can put him at -2 to hit. Then you can drop the stratagem Lightning Fast Reflexes and just chuck him at a horde. So imagine 30 orcs, and they're at -3 to hit, and they've got loads of attacks, and they have to attack him. So all of those 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s are all bouncing back as mortal wounds. It's just orcs killing themselves, essentially, which is a really good counter for hordes, which is something that Harlequins desperately need actually. So that's one that I really like and would really recommend, and I'll be using that again on Thursday against demons, which I'm looking forward to. A simple upgrade though that you could also give him would be just keeping him as Frozen Stars and giving him the Ghoul Mask, which just gives him an additional chance to deny a psychic power, and then also adds 1 to those Deny the Witch rolls, which is a nice simple way of upgrading him and can be really useful against armies like Thousand Suns or Grey Knights or other armies that put out a lot of mortal wounds through those psychic powers, or just generally psychic powers. So that's it, that's the Shadowseer. Let me know what you think. Have you had much success with him? Have you enjoyed him? I've personally just put a second one in my list because I think they're fantastic. I think they are good value, despite the fact that the points cost is quite high, and I love running 2 of them. I found them really effective and very, very useful in all sorts of tactical ways. So let me know in the comments down below, what do you think? Are there any combos that I've missed out? Anything that you've found? Have you had like some crazy run with your Shadowseer, smiting stuff to death or using the Mirror of Minds on something? What have been your experiences? Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Get out.